All right, everybody, it's time to pump it up. I'm so happy you're joining us today, taking care of yourself. And what better way to do that than to listen to A Bite of with me, Derek, and Noah? And guess what? We're talking about the substance today. And I think at the end, you're going to feel better about you.
No, not the finger. Hi, it's been a hot minute.
One hot minute.
You know, the election happened and then we were like, bye.
You're like, we need a little bit of a mental health break.
A lot has happened. If you're following us on social media, you probably have seen stuff. Got cat problems, got sick, got celebrated an anniversary, election. A lot has happened in the ABO household. We decided to go back a little bit in the year and talk about something that we think needs to be talked about.
Yes, absolutely. 100% it needs to be talked about.
And Derek's finger, if you have not seen the substance, this probably might not make sense. But if you have seen it, it does make sense.
I love this finger. I'm a fan of witch fingers in general. This is the first time I've painted a nail of a witch finger. I'm going to go try and wash it off.
It's disgusting.
Yeah, it's great.
So before we get into the discussion and review of the substance, make sure you're following us. Socials, everything is weird right now. We're on everything. We want to make sure we are where you are. So follow us there. You can find it.
Any new, any old, we're there.
Make sure you subscribe. Make sure you follow. Make sure you comment. Make sure you leave reviews. All of the amazing things that you normally hear, it's the same thing all around. Also, just so people know, because I think I did get a message last week of somebody being like, I didn't know you guys had videos. Yes, on YouTube, you can see our video versions of these episodes. Also on Spotify, you can see video versions. So if you would rather watch instead of just listen, those are your options.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so we are going to fully issue a spoiler warning for this because we're going to be spoiling the entire movie of The Substance.
Yes.
You ready to jump in?
Yeah.
All right. So let us officially take a bite of The Substance, written and directed by Coralie Fargeat. Movie star turned fitness guru Elizabeth Sparkle is put out to pasture by shrimp slopping studio exec Harvey. She turns to the glowing green substance to become a better, younger version of herself. Her body gives birth to shining Sue, but Sue takes the advantage of the switch, and the bright stars go supernova.
I didn't like the mention of the shrimp right up the top, but here we are.
Yeah.
That is there is horror, and then there is Dennis Quaid eating shrimp.
Just disgusting.
Different levels of grotesquerie.
And just so much shrimp.
It's
not even like just like a normal shrimp cocktail of like 5 shrimp. It was like 30 shrimp.
It was too much. This is the review.
Yes, this is the most important part of the movie is how much shrimp Dennis Quaid ate.
I mean, I do feel like our show is called A Bite Of, which is like food, right? But we're talking more like consuming things. I feel like this is fair. This is the most that our namesake is going to be in this episode.
Yeah.
I do feel like there is a relationship with food in this movie, but that was a lot. I think looking back on this movie, that was probably the most horrifying part to me. Also, just thinking about that much shrimp. It's like, whoa.
Just thinking about that much shrimp. R.I.P. to those shrimp. I think that there needs to be a trigger warning for this movie. It's like slopping shrimp, close up of gnarly, yellow teeth, lots of smoking, just violence with drumsticks, you know?
That's a lot.
Needles, lots of needles.
Yeah. So before we get into the specifics, what did you think? Give your general opinions of the substance.
General opinion of this is that I loved it, which I think that you were kind of surprised about.
Very.
But there's just something about it that it starts off as a commentary on beauty, on Hollywood, on, relationships. But then it just turns completely 100% absurd. And that's what I love about it. By the end of the film, it's not taking itself too seriously.
Sorry, Derek is very aggressive with the pointing and the witch finger. Every time he does it, I just feel a jab.
When I have a prop, I'm going to use it. I think it does exactly what it wanted to do, and it does it well.
I think that's the thing that I appreciated most about this. This is actually this director's second like movie. Essentially, they did Revenge. I believe that was 2017. Exactly what that movie sounds like. The thing that I'm liking about this director and the commentary that they do is that they give you what they set out to do, and I'm liking this like balance between humor and horror and satirical and just like sledgehammer with the commentary. It's a delicate balance to play, and in this one, I do feel like it's more, it crescendos and builds into the absurd, but that ride to get to that final scene, it goes through all those layers of being satirical. So, you know, with the scalpel, I would say, and then by the end of it, it's just a sledgehammer of like, this is what I'm trying to say.
Yes.
And as we talk about this, I do want to know your opinions on the end, the third act of like, did it work for you if it didn't? But yeah, I think I really enjoyed this movie. I was so surprised that you liked it. I remember when we were trying to think of like, what did we want to do after Agatha? You know, we were kind of feeling like we're in our feelings, right? We were going through a lot of things, and it's like, I don't know, let's look at what we missed. It's like Demi Moore, The Substance. And then I was like, oh God, it's body horror. Don't tell Derek.
Yeah, I think I mean, I knew it was body horror going into it. And I think because I knew that, I was able to brace myself. And when you're, you know, in the comfort of your own home watching something like this, you know, you can kind of turn away and not look when you want to and kind of yelp out loud, which I think when seeing those very visceral scenes allowed me to kind of pull away from it if I needed to, rather than if I'm locked into a theater trying not to make too much noise.
Yeah, that is true. You can't be Brenda from Scary Movie and just full on commentary at the screen.
And she eats chicken in that. So interesting. She could be watching The Substance. I would like to see Brenda watching The Substance. You know, what you were talking about, kind of the absurdity at the end, and like, stick with me for a minute here. This movie, in a way, felt very much like a heightened, more artistic version of Drop Dead Gorgeous.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, right. They're trying to say similar-ish things.
Right. And like with Drop Dead Gorgeous, it starts off kind of like this like small town, you know, funny characters, and then it gets into a murder mystery kind of thing. And then by the end, I mean, spoiler alert, the swan ate her baby. You know what I mean? And then finally, there's like a crazy shootout where Amber Atkins' dreams come true. But so it just reaches that absurd point. And so if you're willing to go along with the ride, I think The Substance kind of does that similar thing where that third act is just completely like, you're just kind of going like, wait, what is happening? But you have to let yourself go for it.
Yeah. This one ain't my baby.
This one ain't my baby.
So I needed that in this movie.
Yes, absolutely.
There's blood everywhere. Yeah, I agree. I think so. The gore. Let's talk about the gore and the prosthetics and the tactileness of this movie. You know, there's levels of body horror, right? And I think that there's body horrors that is done really well. And a lot of times when there is body horror in something, it's trying to say some type of message, or it heightens something within that horror genre. So, you know, you have like John Carpenter's The Thing, which paranoia, you add that with all the practical effects and all this body horror of this shape-shifting thing, you could do CGI or something that makes The Substance just kind of look, I don't know, not as like squelchy and like gross, but they went the route of doing a lot of POV, a lot of tactileness of the practical effects, and I loved that. I feel like this movie coming in like 2 hours and 30 minutes is a lot. It's a long movie, not a lot of dialogue, but having it do these fisheye lenses and all of the technical nature of it really kind of put you in it. How did you feel about those elements that they used?
Well, I think just going to the body horror part of it is the commentary there for me is, what are we as human beings willing to do to fit in, feel better about ourselves? What are we willing to do because others' opinions of us change how we perceive ourselves? And so it's a really interesting thing, you know, of watching her birth this other, I don't know, is it another version of her 2.0? I don't know what it is, but, and then have to sew herself back up, right? See these stitches, watch her pull the spinal fluid out of herself. You know, it's so sickening, but at the same time, I mean, just to share a little bit about myself, when I was like 19 or 20 years old, I had liposuction, I had a mini tummy tuck. And I remember after it just looking at myself, and I had this port where liquids would come out of myself and I would have to empty it out. And it was just such a weird thing and so freaky. But it was something I wanted to do for myself to feel better about myself at such a young age. So it's like that body horror when you're getting plastic surgery and things like that. And by all means, do whatever you want to do to make yourself feel better about yourself or whatever. But it's creepy, right? When you're thinking about modifying your body and how kind of violent it can be with liposuction and rhinoplasty. And so I think this movie is like, although it's heightened, it's taking that because it is a reality of what we go through.
Right. This movie is very odd because it doesn't give you a time period, but it feels like the 80s. And I feel like even to this day, a lot of people, like, I don't know, idealize the 80s. It's like, that's the movement, right? That's the Jane Fonda, workout videos and stuff like that. Like, that's the epitome of beauty. And I feel like with this movie, while it's doing commentary and all of that, right? It's also not, you can't really place it, but it's also timeless things. There's pagers in this movie, but then there's still like flat screen TVs.
And cell phones too.
So it's like interesting in how they mix this without actually telling you a time period. And then, it's in LA, right? The opening shot shows the star of Elizabeth Sparkle and it snows in LA. But this movie doesn't tell you anything on why it's doing this. It just is. And I think that adds to the bizarre nature of this movie of like, wait, okay, I guess we won't know, right? It's just like everything is a cartoon of itself except for Sue and Elizabeth. And I think that's a really interesting way to do a movie.
It reminds me of the horror film It Follows.
Oh,
right? Where it had that same feeling of like modern, but yet
timeless.
And we're looking at these kids and they're kind of dressed indistinctly as far as fashion is concerned, but yet the one friend has her cell phone, her seashell e-reader, which is kind of new and interesting. So, but I like that, right? It makes it feel, like you said, timeless in that sense. And that if you think about it, these issues that it's talking about have always existed in some way. And what it means to be someone who, I think they mentioned kind of in passing that she won an Oscar at some point.
Some type of award.
Right.
Yeah.
But now she's kind of, quote, too old.
Let's, real quick, I want to say Demi Moore is 50, in her 50s, right? The character is 50. She doesn't look 50. So the fact that they're all saying this, right? It's like, you have to, when you get an actor to do this, right? Especially somebody of this caliber and this beauty, you have to have them like go all in, and they did. But it's so funny to see this of like, no, you're the image that people try to be. And then we're seeing you try to chase that because you're like a has-been or you're like past your prime, and you're not. And it's so fucked up that people still do that, even though they're the goal that people were trying to reach. So I just think that's really interesting.
Well, when I think about this movie and like speaking about Demi Moore, this movie feels like a trap that's been set for us because we do that, right? We're watching Demi Moore stand naked in a mirror, kind of, although she's not verbalizing it, picking herself apart in some way.
Constantly.
And we're saying in our minds, or maybe out loud, oh my gosh, but she's so beautiful. How can she do this? But that's kind of the trap, right? Is that we as the viewer are commenting on what she looks like and are watching her pick herself apart. But the whole movie is her dealing with that and going to extremes to stop that. So we're kind of part of the machine,
right,
in a way of what this movie is saying. And so you can't help but, because she is stunningly gorgeous, right? But we're commenting on it, which is what's happening to her in the movie.
Both leads, Margaret Qualley and Demi Moore, beautiful. I really appreciate a movie that can go more than 2 hours, going closer to 3, with hardly any dialogue. I would love to know like how much actual dialogue is in this movie. I believe the black market like dealer of the substance might actually say more lines than Demi Moore does. Like I actually think he does. But they both just so phenomenal and emoting what's happening or what they're trying to convey just in their expressions or in their actual actions. So what did you think about the substance? Let's kind of change gears, because I know we're talking a lot about the message, right? But let's talk about the substance and like the actual steps and everything that goes into it, and like the lengths that people will go to do what they want, right?
Yeah. Well, I think it's effective. And when you're kind of wrapping your head around it, you know, I'm going into this movie going like, does it turn her younger? What actually happens? But in literally the first scene of the movie, we see an egg, it gets injected with a substance, and the yolk splits into two.
Right.
So then you know right off the bat, oh, it becomes a different thing. They become a different thing. And so, okay, I got that. But when you're watching the steps for the first time, it's horrifying.
It's so fucking cool.
Oh my
It's
gosh.
so cool.
It's just, and then you're, and so, right, because it's sci-fi, it's body horror, and you're like watching this person split from behind and birthing a whole other human being, but yet they're one.
Yeah, I think, you know, there is a message that is there of like, regardless, you are the same person. Like if you think that you're not as beautiful, or you think you are, your younger self and your older self are the same person, right? I just love how it worked. I love that there was like the 7 days you have to switch off, which I think is an interesting thing to have. Then our character of Elizabeth see the success of Sue that is taking her place, even though it is her. There was one thing that I wasn't too clear on of this is like, do they know, like, I guess prior to the birthing, like, do they have all the memories of each other? And then, because then it seems like after, whenever one is asleep and one is awake, they don't share those things. So I was a little confused on that. But I guess that does make it harder to like remind yourself that you're one.
Mm.
But I loved how the substance worked. I thought it was so cool to have something literally come out of you to split you into not even a younger version of yourself, just like a different version of yourself. And then the lengths that you will go, the pain that you'll put yourself through to achieve that beauty or to achieve that goal is crazy.
Right. And if you haven't seen it yet, right, if you go over those 7 days, basically you take from each other.
Right.
And so the Sue character ends up going much further than she's supposed to. And Demi Moore keeps kind of falling apart, right? So the first time we see the finger, then it goes to her legs and so on and so forth. And you're watching this character and you are kind of rooting for Elizabeth and saying, stop doing it, kill her. Don't do this to yourself.
Right.
But she can't seem to stop it.
Right.
Right. And even when she has aged, 20, 30 years and she's about to do it, she still can't bring herself to stop it because there is that connection and she's watching this other part of herself reach fame and stardom.
Right. I mean, I think like surface level, right? This movie is talking about like the beauty standards that are put on women, or just on everybody, on how, the patriarchy is of like, I think a lot of the men, especially Dennis Quaid, which like, fuck Dennis Quaid as a person, but like, especially in this movie, is a cartoon version of like patriarchy and like the pressures that they put on women. But I liked that because it wasn't trying to hide anything. Even like the executives, right? All of the men in this movie are exactly how you would think they would be played. So I liked them doing that, but I think there's like different layers of this. Like surface level, it's like, yeah, there's those things, right? And then it's like what you were talking about, like Hollywood, how Hollywood and the beauty standards are put on people. Then it's like the pain that we will put ourselves through, even though we know, like she's literally seeing herself fall apart and age and get gross and disgusting. And she's like, well, as long as like this, like that's not her in some ways. There's a certain point when it's just like, that's not you anymore.
Yeah.
Because you're literally fighting yourself. You've lost yourself along the way.
And that version of her is hurting her.
On purpose.
On
Both,
purpose.
she's hurting herself. And then the younger version, Sue, is purposefully hurting where she came from. It's just, it's so fucked up. But it's so effective because they do it physically, right?
Yes. I wanted to talk about the Harvey character. And one of the things I noticed about him, and I'm kind of curious of maybe your thoughts of why they did this, is that the whole time he's wearing these kind of like steel heeled boots. and you hear him clomping and clomping around. Like, why do you think they made that decision?
I think they just like tried to put everything they can into like, you immediately know who he is and what he would do the second that you see him.
Yeah, totally. And I almost wonder if it's something like, even with the way he walks and the way he acts and the way he eats, it shows that men can be loud and disgusting and stomp around and take up so much space, and they still get what they want and they're still in control. Whereas a woman has to be demure and quiet.
Demure.
And demure.
Very mindful. Very Sue.
Exactly. And so in order to survive, they have to kind of be quiet at all times.
Right.
You know, and so that juxtaposition between the two is really interesting, just in the costuming of one of the characters. You know, all of his outfits are so loud and so garish, and it never goes against him in any way. He still has all the control in the situation.
Yeah. And also, let's be real. This is for like a lower network TV show. Like, what did he say? Our viewership was like 42, and then it went up to like 200 something. It's like, really? Like, you're acting like a hot shot, and this is what you're producing? Okay, fine. So it's just funny, right? It's like, even though his kingdom is so tiny and small and really means nothing, he still acts that way, right? He acts like he is this ruler of this bigger thing than it actually is. Typical man. Typical man.
Typical man.
So out of all the body horror, out of all the disgusting things, what was your favorite? And what was the one that you just could not handle? I have to know these two.
Okay, so
favorite could be scene. It doesn't have to necessarily be body stuff.
Okay. One of my favorite scenes, which is interesting, is when Elizabeth, Demi Moore, her revenge on Sue is to cook as much fatty French food as possible and leave the apartment disgusting and a mess.
And she ate it.
Yeah. But it's just like you were talking about before, just these close-ups of her, just her losing her mind in a sense. You know, she's beating these eggs and they're just going all over her, these yolks in her hair, and her eyes are milky, and she's just out of her mind. But I loved it.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't help but just be like, oh, that was so good. I think my least favorite scene,
like, cover your eyes, can't look at it.
Oh, well, all the needle stuff I couldn't watch because it got pretty intense, but I did not enjoy the chicken drumstick coming out of Sue's belly button.
That one, there was multiple times in this movie where I love horror, right? I can do so many, like, it does not bother me, whatever. This movie, there was moments where I was just like, are they really doing this? Like, okay, cool. Like, let's see where this comes from. The fact that she pulled a full chicken leg out of her belly button
that started in her ass
was amazing. It was so good.
And then, you know who would like this movie probably? You know, people who watch like Dr. Pimple Popper? They would love this.
Hello?
Because it's, whenever those show up on my Explore feed, I'm like, no.
Yeah. I mean, that's body horror though, right? It's like anything that has to do with the body is just like, it grosses people out. And I think there's a moment, especially with needles, they do a lot of needle work in this. And I think they knew that, right? I'm curious if the planning of how the substance works is like, no, we need to have like needles in there as much as possible. Because when you get the spinal fluid out, the needle is like huge. I'm like, I don't even know how that's going up the spinal, whatever. I don't know how it works. I will say, I think the one that my favorite scene is, and I think it's a really quiet one, and I think it's so effective, is when she finally gets asked out on a date. I think it's Fred, right? The character's name, who seems harmless, right? He just doesn't typically look like somebody that like Demi Moore's caliber would go for.
Yeah, let's say he doesn't look like Bruce Willis or Ashton Kutcher.
Not at all. But could be a great guy. And so she gets ready for the night, right? And she takes so long to get ready. And she constantly goes back to the mirror, changes her makeup, completely changes her look, adds stuff. And she doesn't end up going because she just can't be happy with herself. And I think that was so effective. I was like, it like started making me tear up a little bit because I was like, that, like, even though that was the quietest scene in this movie, That was really effective.
And what's interesting about that scene is that at that point in the movie, the only thing that has turned in that moment is just her finger.
Right. And she can cover
And
it up.
she has gloves on,
Right.
but still, it's just affected her completely.
Yeah. Yeah.
What was your least favorite?
It has to be when the infection on the spine, and she kept going in to get it. Right. I was like, ooh, that's like a lot. And then like when it came out and it was like black, I was just like, no.
And I don't know if you noticed this actually in the scene that I liked with her cooking the food, she's wearing a white robe, and on the back of the white robe, it's stained.
Oh, right.
Where that wound is, because it's just bleeding and pussy, and she's not taking care of it in any way.
Ugh.
Ugh.
I mean,
Yikes.
Speaking of the clothes, you mentioned the robe. Fashion. Oh, fashion. So good in this movie. The star, aside from these two, was that dragon robe.
Oh, yeah.
That was sex.
So good.
I'm not like a fan of dragon stuff, but that, I could get into that.
I love that yellow trench that she was running
She
around
wore
the
it a
city
lot.
with. Yeah. That was like her security blanket.
Good point.
But, and again, that's the funny thing, right? Is that so at one point, again, her finger is the only thing that has turned. And yet when she goes to pick up more of the substance, she like completely covers herself up.
Right. I mean, there's shame too.
It's the shame. So that's another interesting thing, is that she's ashamed of what she's doing, but yet she can't stop herself from doing it.
Right. Yeah. Oof.
Oh man. Just to get back into the way it's shot and everything, it's just you feel like you're with the characters when they're going through whatever they're going through. And one of the interesting things that you had pointed out while we were watching it is that there's a few showers in this. They take showers, and when they're in the shower, they're completely trapped in it. There is no door to get out of it. It's just all tile around them. So it's like this box of shame, these shameful showers that they can't escape from.
Right. Yeah.
You know?
And there is this one scene, just kind of picking out moments that I think are really subtle but really effective, is when Elizabeth finally goes to the studio. I think it's when she goes to the studio to be fired, essentially. And, the hallway, which I really much appreciate the carpet, because it reminded me of what's it called, The Shining. So I was like, I like that. But the whole hallway down had posters of Elizabeth Sparkle, and now that it's Sue, it's towards the end, I believe, or midway through when she goes back there, and there's only 2 posters. And those are the only posters that Sue ever gets on this wall. And it's really interesting to think of, like, she was there for a long time, and she had all of these things, just posters of like all this work that she's done. And then Sue, even though she's the new version, she only got 2. And it's like, even though you thought you weren't where you were, or people told you weren't, look at all the work that you did.
Yeah.
Like that's the beauty of getting older and looking back at everything that you did. That's beautiful, not the newer version.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Well, and honestly, for Elizabeth, this is like a flippant comment, but just like start a YouTube channel. You know what I mean? She has enough of a following. You'll be fine.
A thing though in this imaginary.
That's true. I don't know if YouTube's the thing.
Okay, so let's talk about the third act, right? Because I think it does build up to this. What did you think about the third act? Because I feel like very much a lot of the movie, even though it was satirical for a lot of it, it told you, right? And I feel like the third act just was like, if you didn't get it, do you get it now?
Yeah, the lesson here is that making a copy of a copy is not going to go well.
Right.
But for the third act, I think that it needed that final punch. Like literally, right? We have a big battle between the two of them, but then we meet Monstro Elizasu, which I think was just the piece de resistance of the substance.
Right.
I think that what would have been a better ending than that, right? The full body horror, the full modification, a complete mix of the two of them that is still going to curl that one strand of hair.
That was so sad. It burnt off.
It burnt off, but she was like, she shoved those earrings into to her head. But I think that if they went any smaller than that, it wouldn't have been as effective.
I agree. I feel like the movie is long. I didn't feel like it was long as I was watching it because I very much enjoyed it. I do feel like, and the reason why I was asking about the third act is I could feel that being like too much. Like that's just what are we doing now, right? For people. I liked it. I wanted more. I'm like, how much more could we possibly do? And then her face fell off. And then she ended up going to her star. And then that was it for Elizabeth Sparkle. That was beautiful. I loved that. It bookending of the entire thing. That's opening shot, ending shot. Great. I loved it. I loved how much blood was in there. I love that even the audience members like, that's a monster. And people just screaming and not doing anything. It's like, yeah, of course. Like,
yeah.
This is what people would do.
Yeah. And I think that, right, this audience wanted so much from her and pushed her so much. And then they kind of got what they wanted.
I think, is his name Henry? Dennis Quaid's character?
I think so.
Something like that. Anyway, doesn't matter. I think he said at some point to all those executives that came, I think he said something of like, all the work I put into her, or this is like, I made her. He said something along those lines. And it's like, yeah, this is what you made.
Yeah. Harvey. I just looked it up.
Whatever.
Yeah, his name is Harvey. But exactly. And that one part, so there is a part where another trigger warning, pulling out teeth. So Sue is pulling out her teeth. And so she's dealing with falling apart. And that's when him and all the executives come to her and he says, like, you always got to smile. So it doesn't matter what you're going through. As long as you smile, it'll be fine. And so we also see that on stage of like, she's trying to smile. I'm here. And then she ends up exploding.
Yeah. I'm curious. Do you think that her face, when she finally went onto the star, was it supposed to be like a Medusa head type thing? That's the feeling I got from it. I mean, it does mimic the ketchup that fell on it in the beginning, but it did very much look Medusa-y to me.
Yeah.
Could be wrong.
What's the story of Medusa? I should remember this from
a woman that was scorned.
Right, of us doing Percy Jackson.
I mean, that's the woman that I'm thinking of now. I don't know. I don't remember the actual version.
Yeah, she did not turn to stone, though, or turn anyone else to stone.
So final thoughts.
Final thoughts is that this movie's all about butts.
Yeah. Ooh. There was man butt.
There was man butt.
That was nice.
There's Demi Moore butt. There's Margaret Qualley butt. And then there is hunk butt as well. So
we didn't write his name down.
No, we got all the butts there. Yeah, but no, in reality, I think that you can go into watching this movie with a number of lenses. You can go into it for the message. You can go into it to see Demi Moore just be awesome. You can go into it for the body horror. I think that you have to be willing to go along on the journey. And I think that it set out and delivered what it wanted to.
Yeah, I agree. You got what you paid for this movie. I mean, I think this is like kind of career defining performance for Demi Moore, even though she hardly spoke. Yeah. It's all in that acting. She's just phenomenal in this. And so is Margaret Qualley. I think like you needed somebody that could shine just as bright as Demi and also play off of each other. And I think that final showdown literally between them, even though Demi Moore is literally, you can't recognize her, was phenomenal.
Yeah.
So good.
And just the sound design of the entire movie, the music that they use.
I wonder if it was like, if we had subtitles on, if it would be like squish.
It definitely. It better for sure. But yeah, I think that the cast, it's small, the dialogue, not a ton, but everything is used exactly how it should be.
Yeah. 2 thumbs up.
2 thumbs up.
I like sure. It. I'm excited to see what this director does next. And I hope this is a resurgence for Demi. I feel like she hasn't been in anything in a long time.
I think when you're Demi Moore, right, you're like...
You don't have to.
No, she was part of the Brat Pack, right? But then she kind of came back again in the 90s. Then she did Charlie's Angels in the early 2000s. Every once in a while, she just reappears, graces our screen. We're happy to see it. And then she's like, all right, I'm going to go chill for a little bit again. She's like,
you know that movie? I want to do that movie.
movie.
That gross one?
Yeah.
All right. Well, let us know what you thought of The Substance. Would you take The Substance? I hope not. That seems like so much work.
I don't know. No.
Also, if you don't have a tiled bathroom, you're fucked.
You're fucked. And also, just like having regular pedestrian people suture themselves up and do spinal taps.
Fine.
Seems very dangerous.
Yeah.
Very dangerous.
Well,
not for me.
Don't buy black market drugs, kids.
That's the moral of the story. How much does The Substance cost? That's the question.
Nothing. I don't think they exchange any money.
Right?
Yeah.
503. I don't know.
All right. Until next time.
Bye.
Bye.